core values are the non-negotiable principles that guide your behavior and decisions. Historically, people have been willing to die for these things. They believe in them deeply enough. They're intrinsic. They're not aspirational. They reflect who you are, not who you wish you would be. They're consistent. They show up across life, work, relationships, and personal decisions, and they're clarifying. They help you make better choices. At the same time, core values decisions have a cost. And oftentimes you're going against the grain.
Welcome to the Mindform Podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. This is the Mindform Podcast. Here we share real conversations with earnest seekers of the good life, uncovering gems of wisdom in every episode. Each guest is a one-of-a-kind expert in philosophy, psychology, and personal growth, and all are members of the psychotecture collective and training platform Mindform. This week's guest is Robert Glazer. Robert is the founder and chairman of the board of Acceleration Partners, a global leader in partnership marketing. He co-founded and chaired Brand Cycle. He's a serial entrepreneur, an award-winning executive, host of the Elevate podcast, and author of multiple books, notably Elevate and The Compass Within, which I'd love to discuss today. Robert is passionate about helping individuals and organizations elevate their performance and reach their potential. Thanks for being here, Robert. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. What's alive in you right now, Robert? How you doing?
I'm good. It's a Monday morning. Are you Tuesday? I don't know what time. What day is it there?
Yeah, Tuesday at 5 a.m.
I always say, how's the future? You got any stock tips for me?
No, I haven't checked the markets this morning.
Tell me what's going to do well tomorrow. No, all good. I'm excited as we get up to the launch of this book and to see more than anything that the concept and the work is really, really resonating with people.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm keen to hear more about that. Well, let's start with a bit on you and your growth journey, your wisdom journey. Could you just kind of give us a few of the core learnings and experiences that have led you to what you do today, writing the book that you're about to publish, all that?
Yeah, my first learning was probably I'm not meant to work for other people. So that someone once said to me, if you don't take this job I'm giving you, you'll probably never have another one. And he meant that in a nice way. And I was sort of unemployable. So I set off on my entrepreneurial journey. And then I think like a lot of leaders, it was like, hey, here are some best practices from people I've worked with that I like. And here are some opposites of things. But we were scaling the business. It didn't feel like me. The major inflection point was a 5-day leadership program that I went to with Entrepreneurs Organization. That's where this concept of what do you value and how do you use that as the foundation of your authentic leadership first started to come about. While that training got me thinking about core values and realizing they're important, it didn't actually tell us how to figure it out. And that sent me on a personal journey. It also then led me to take what I figured out, turn it into a curriculum and a training program at our company, then turn it into a course, then see how many people like the course, but realize that there's a lot of people that don't do courses, and then decide, could I turn this into a book and maybe a story and get a lot more people interested in going down this same values journey.
Yeah, I love that you present, I mean, maybe we can go into a bit of detail about the book, but I love that you present it as a story. You don't often get that intersection of like a highly structured and well laid out like model that people can follow along, and that in the narrative format. What inspired that?
So what inspired that was I had this vision that I was going to write this book on values or core values. And I can tell you, I can see it's sitting in a row of books at Barnes and Nobles, and everyone walks by it because they're like, well, that sounds boring. Like, and I don't core values. What is it? That's very like, abstract. And so I really needed to show it. And I think like, I thought the story would help. And already like, a couple hundred people have gotten preview copies and stuff. And they'll tell me I saw myself in Jamie, and like, Jamie's just a mirror. He's a vehicle in the character in the story for interactions that we've had and things that we've had in our own life. And so I think in that way, it's both personalized it for people and then shown them, oh, he means something very specific by this, and actually I think I'd like this sort of clarity. And then you can either, learn that through the story because you can watch it happen, or you can read the last chapter and it will reinforce it for you.
Yeah, no, it is powerful. It's a shift I'm like always trying to make, just a little bit more moving in that direction at all times. Is can I tell this through a story, a real thing that happened to me or somebody else, paint a picture for somebody, as opposed to, it doesn't sync as well, or it's not as enjoyable to hear either. Just, oh, these are the facts, this is the information, and you just kind of dump it on people. So yeah, I'm excited to see for you how that shifts it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni. A lot of people have read it works. I like the parable format myself. I tend to sit down and read the whole thing. And my daughter had also challenged me too. She's like, I'm always challenging them. She's like, you live in the world of all nonfiction. Like, why don't you try writing fiction? And I think that combination of like, I want to do this. I really don't think anyone will read the book. Fiction, parable, maybe there's something to try there.
That's awesome that came from your kid.
Yeah, it's great when you see your kids calling you out on the same stuff that you called them out on, right? It takes a little while, but happens eventually.
Yeah, so I see a shift, right, with these books that are coming out compared to what you've written in the past as well. There's, it seems a lot of your professional focus is, well, from a bit of an outsider in that world, it's very lingo. I saw like the main review you put up on your page for one of the books is like, if you're a CMO and you're focused on conversions but not cash flow or something, this is the book for you, and it's about kind of adjusting your work to the digital age, things like that. But these books seem much more personal and much more generally applicable. They're about finding not just in your team, say in a professional business context, but in yourself as well, values, unlocking your capacity, your potential. So what's going on there?
So I built a marketing firm, and I realized that I could communicate with people pretty well through writing in the industry and challenging some of the assumptions. And so I cut my teeth kind of on in marketing and in our industry. But as we started to build that company, I learned thing about companies and culture and leadership, and started writing about that as well. And so I don't lead that company anymore. So I'm not writing as much about marketing anymore, but it ended up, the company and culture stuff was sort of the learning to build that business, and the marketing books were really kind of how I cut my teeth on that. So you're astute in noticing that, but they actually represent the sort of two sides of my career, which was building an organization that won 30 Best Places to Work award and had a great culture and won all these Glassdoor awards, but also it was a marketing company. And the way that we grew as a marketing company was we challenged a lot of the assumptions and things in our industry and tried to do things differently.
Right. Okay. So on this journey, you've moved obviously through different career places, focus on different things, different places and experiences. So we can call this the landscape. And you've carried an evolving map with you, the beliefs and values you use to navigate. We'll get a lot more into values, of course. So think of that, right? Map, landscape. What is the X on your map? Where have you been trying to get to this whole time? What answer to a question or state of things have you been trying to achieve as you do all of this?
So what's interesting, and as you figure out your values, and I talk about these 3 climbs, you realize it's less about a destination and more about the climb, right? And my dominant value is to find a better way and share it. So if you look at the theme of all those books and whatever, there was some kernel of something that I thought I figured out that if I shared it with people or an industry or CEOs or my own employees, like they could do something better. So I am the problem with high achievers, and I had to come off of this drug, is that when we get to a goal, all we do is reset a goal, right? And so I've tried to fix something that's a little more sustainable. So my next 5 years, and with coming out with this book, where can I help 1 million people figure out their core values? That would be a really cool dent that I'd like to leave in the universe. It's not a financial goal, it's an impact goal. And that's what I'm focused on now. And hopefully, we knock off a few of those in this podcast.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very, I think it's a profound goal. I know in Elevate, you talk about now you can correct me if I've got this wrong, but spiritual capacity is the language you use, right? To talk about getting in touch with what are your values and what they are. And I think that's an, even though it's not, it's non-theological, which of course is just one branch of spirituality, but I think that's an apt term. I think it's a real shift in the collective psyche to have something like a discovery of values, and it's not just a neat kind of pop psychology hack or something to know your values. People who have that versus people who don't.
No, there's a lot of data. It's equivalent
Yeah.
to drugs in terms of their happiness, or otherwise.
Exactly.
But it's interesting you mentioned that, because when I talked about spiritual capacity and figuring out your core values and elevate, I didn't have this work and framework available, and so it was the thing that people asked me the most. I'm in on. I get the value of understanding your value. How do I do it? And I was like, well, you can come work in my company and do our training. It was before I had the course. So in some ways, this book is the double click on that, the thing I was asked the most, and giving people the answer, which is, if you want to do that work, here's the playbook to do it.
Awesome. Okay, in the last few years, what have been the few, like maybe one or two biggest shifts you've made in your map, right? Huge, big transformations in how you view the world, what you value maybe, as you've gone along in this work.
I have sort of developed. I probably had a little bit too much hubris and belief in my own beliefs, and I have, particularly around some of the political stuff going on, I've become a much better listener and understanding different people's perspectives to evolve my viewpoint. And one of my key kind of things these days is, like, even if you don't agree with someone's point of view, you should understand it, and you should understand it deeply. Particularly if you want to take it down, you should understand it deeply. Like,
yeah, for selfish reasons, even
at a real level of where it comes from, right? Like, I give it as an example. Like, you may be someone who's super against entitlements, right? And you have all these ideological reasons. Well, when you talk to someone who grew up on food stamps and only got by food stamps, and you kind of have that discussion, it can't help but not improve your thinking in some way or evolve your viewpoint. And you still may not be a pro entitlement person, but you may start to think about that in a little bit of a different way. And I think a lot of the problems we have today is that people, and the Charlie Kirk thing kind of highlighted this, like, they don't even want to listen, and they think that even having the discussion is a problem. And that, to me, is 100% wrong.
Yeah, no, in my last conversation we had on here on the podcast, that was a real core thing that came out, was curiosity is like a superpower. I mean, curiosity, just anything that's going on, an emotional reaction you're having within, or your capacity to navigate a situation, or the way you're relating to somebody else. If you just bring curiosity, which is a joyful, fun, easy state of mind, really, if you can get into it, that the whole thing just transforms. And yeah.
Yeah, imagine you said the worst thing in the world to me, and I don't know, but you said, like, I deeply hate purple Martians, right? Or I don't know, whatever it is. I mean, the next question would be like, hey, explain to me why, or where did that come from? And there's often a story that might surprise you. It doesn't justify it, but that question of, like, okay, well, tell me where did that come from? Like, that's a good practice in any walk of life or business. Like, if you're debating, should we do the product, and someone deeply believes that they should launch the product, you don't. Okay, so tell me the why. Why do you believe so deeply in this? And there may be a good reason behind. You may find out they need to make their quarterly bonus and they're willing to bet anything on it. Or you may find they have some information in some better market information about why it's going to be successful, than you have.
Yeah, either way, you've gained a lot just finding out, haven't you? Okay, I want to get into values. Maybe we can start with, what are your top 2 or 3 values?
Yeah, I have 5, but I'll give you the top 3. I'd say it's find a better way, self-reliance, and long-term orientation. Those are 3 that are kind of strong.
Self-reliance. Yeah. So you are or were against entitlements. I've found that out now.
Yep. No? We could play this game with you. It all goes together. Everything in the this values process doesn't create anything. It illuminates where everything connects and all the dots in your life. Yes, I am not entitlements per se, but I that is part of it. But people that are dependent, extremely dependent, is the antithesis of what I value. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I had having that thought, I missed the third one. What was the third one?
Long-term orientation.
Long-term orientation.
So I
Oh, I
actually
like that.
struggle to do things that would be very beneficial in the short term if I don't understand their impact in the long.
That's so interesting. And perhaps uncommon. I suppose you would have passed the marshmallow test if you know, you know.
I would have crushed the marshmallow test. I have one kid who would have waited 10 years, and then I have one kid who would have eaten both marshmallows in like 1 second. And both of
Yeah,
them would be, and the middle one is probably in the middle. So yeah.
my son is just about 3, and like I was just this proud, like joyful moment. He passed that. Well, I kind of manufactured a bit of a marshmallow test for him, where we have this 5-minute show called Number Blocks that we watch every evening as sort of part of the bedtime routine. And he's like, "Oh, I want to watch another episode tonight," which we never do. And I said, "Okay, we can, but it means we won't watch one tomorrow. Do you want to do that?" And it was back and forth for a while. He was thinking really hard about it, but he chose to wait. I was like, "Yes, you're going places."
Or if he
This is
chose
so
to
important.
take it and then didn't throw a fit the next day, that's good too, right?
Yes, true.
Yeah,
If he was able to
yeah.
commit to the choice, yeah,
Yes,
that's
exactly.
true too. Amazing. Okay, what is the cost of not knowing your values?
The cost is really bad decisions. And we talk about the book in the context of this big 3, which is your community, your vocation, or your job, and your relationships. If you
Mhm.
get those decisions wrong, they are very low probability of working out, and huge impact on your sort of happiness and satisfaction. So I think there's a big cost to not understanding this and saving you a lot of pain, and making sure that, again, I think a lot of us, you saw the opposite. I could ask you something you really hate and you'll describe it to me, and then the opposite is probably a value. The problem, because we know when our values are violated, the problem is a lot of us operate with this. We hit the electric fence and we get electrocuted and we're like, oh, bad, right? The goal is to like have a big sign before the electric fence that says, don't go here and go into this pasture, because this is your happy place and this is your not happy place. The analogy I use is if you're driving a car through a tunnel, right? Not understanding your values is the lights are off. I'm going to hit the wall. It's going to make a terrible sound. I'm going to pull off. I'm going to hit the other wall. I'm probably going to get through the tunnel. The car is going to look like crap when it comes out. It's all, and this is how I think how a lot of us operate values versus the lights are on, the yellow lights are clear. We don't even go near the wall. Like stay in the lane, and you should do more things that are aligned to your values, and you should get out of things that run contra to your values.
Right. Yeah. So the danger is you end up a place that isn't where you want to be because you didn't know where you wanted to be and you weren't heading there. Yeah. Makes
Yeah, and
sense.
like I said, there's a short-term cost and a long-term cost. You can go against them in the short term and you'll feel pretty crappy because it's like kind of constantly going up something that's hitting you in the head. Or you could subjugate them. You could say, I need to and suppress them. And my experience is at some point that will come out and sort of explode into almost a bigger mess, because you're fundamentally like lying to yourself about and doing things that you don't believe in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm kind of constantly surprised at my own, mainly, really, but also people in general's capacity to really suppress what you actually believe, what you actually value, and for whatever reason, trauma sometimes,
Yeah.
trying to get approval from other people who you think you should be. You know, you get all these ideas and orientations and you think they're you, but they're just what you think you should think, or they think you should value, or think you should believe for some other reason. uh, and yeah, we can hurt ourselves for a really long time. Maybe that's a good question. How do you know the difference between what you value and what you think you should value, the path you want
Well,
to be
I
in?
think that's
Yeah.
the hard part these days, because there's a cost to living by. Actually, let's step up for a minute. Just go back to 10,000 feet. So my definition of core values are the non-negotiable principles that guide your behavior and decisions. Historically, people have been willing to die for these things. You know, they believe
Hmm.
in them deeply enough. They're intrinsic. They're not aspirational. They reflect who you are,
Right.
not who you wish you would be. You can go back when you figure them out, trace a lot of your life, and you're like, oh, that all makes sense. They're consistent. They show up across life, work, relationships, and personal decisions, and they're clarifying. They help you make better choices. At the same time, core values decisions have a cost. right? Like, and oftentimes you're going against the grain. And today in social media and the real-time news and everything, you don't get credit when your boat and your stream are going in the same direction. You get credit when the stream's going in one direction and you're willing to point your boat uphill, and that'll have a cost, right? You'll be the only one not posting about something that you don't believe in. But then maybe 2 years later, when that looks terrible in history or whatever, you can be like, look, I was consistent the whole time. Like, I thought that was a horrible behavior. And even though all my friends were condoning it, like, I didn't do that. So these decisions tend to survive the long-term test, but they can get uncomfortable and expensive in the moment. Like, it may cost you a job, but it may get you the jobs for the rest of your life, right? So there's a woman who lost her job at one of the law firms here that chose to, not fight Trump when he kind of went after law firms. And again, not to be political, but it was a blatantly illegal order that the Supreme Court struck down like 2 weeks later. And any lawyer worth their salt would know that that was going to get struck down. But some firms were scared, and so they capitulated. And she sent out a memo, to the company and was like, look, if we're not going to stand up to the law, no one else is, and did kind of her best Jerry Maguire. Now, that cost her a job, but I am guessing she will have a lot of jobs in the legal profession for the rest of her life, being willing as a 27-year-old associate to kind of stand up to the firm and be like, we are not doing the right thing here.
Yeah, and I suppose there's kind of, it's the different kinds of reward as well, right? There's a difference. I mean, and this will line up for you in your long-term thinking, long-term decision-making bias, right? But there's a difference between the feel-good of keeping a job that you like, the conveniences of that, and the feel-good of like going to bed knowing that you did the right thing, for example.
Or going to bed that you knew that you did something that was unauthentic, right? The opposite of like, I said something I really didn't believe today, And look, you may have a value that to be a provider, and it may be more important to you in the short term that you don't lose your job or cost your family any harm. But again, you're going to have to reconcile that dissonance.
I think that example you gave of the electric fence, right, in terms of going off track with the values, I would take it a little bit further as well. And I would say sometimes we're hitting the electric fence and we're feeling the pain, but we're not. And this happens all the time, right? Like, people still aren't making the connection that that's what's causing the pain.
I'm getting
electrocuted. And they're not letting go of the fence, and they're angry. Yeah. And and they're still going in that direction. Yeah. They're just pushing into the fence harder. It's incredible
and
how
this is yeah, sorry, go ahead. No,
I was just gonna say it's incredible how acute and like it's immediate and intense, the pain, the discomfort of misaligning with your values. And I think we've all experienced that, and yet somehow we can go through that many times and miss the memo on, oh, this is because I'm not aligning with my values, this is the way I need to reorient. I suppose it's just the language we have as a collective about what's the good life, how to be happy.
Yeah, and look, burnout in my experience is not related to hours. It's the hours, probably, I've never tried to say this formula, so it's the hours spent doing things that really align to your values, probably divided by the hours spent doing things that, because an hour spent doing something that you're aligned is fast, it's quick, it's 10 minutes spent doing the opposite, or 10 minutes spent for me talking to someone about their trust fund, and how they're super dependent. Like it's like a whole day. Like, it's so miserable. It's like a whole day. So that's, it's not the quantity, the quantity of time we spend in these areas. It's what's easy and what's hard. And as you said, like, I might not realize this is so hard because it's just, everyone I'm dealing with here is against my values, and it just makes everything hard. It's why I'm on pins and needles about everything.
How did you come to know you say you have your 5 kind of pretty clearly set in for you? How did you come to know that?
So
know your
I
values?
left this session and I was like, I am a values-driven leader. I am operating by the electric fence. I want to know what they are. And I went and looked online. There were a lot of keyword lists, and I was like, this isn't going to do it. And
what was wrong with the keyword lists?
They're like
What was
one
missing?
word keywords. And I think like if you try to think about core values as actionable, like one word don't work. And you're picking the keyword, you're not getting to the root and the why. What's more important is to getting deep. Like we can do this experiment in a minute. Like I'll ask you, like,
Yes,
and
let's do it.
we get to the root of something. So I figured out mine. We started, I actually thought it was like my unlock for me in leadership. I took that process, I turned it into a training curriculum, as I kind of said before, for the company. And when I saw that worked, then we kind of opened it up even more. But that was the impetus for me, was like, I want to figure this out. And I didn't find anything that was good. And I've seen lots of people's presentations on core, and they tend to be keywords. And I'm a no one word core value. Integrity doesn't work as a core value. Family doesn't work as a core value. They're two of the most common ones. There's something below each of those that's the core value, because family could integrity could either be you tell the truth, or you do what you say and you say what you do, or you live life to your greatest ability, right? And that's really what's more important. Family could be about showing up for some people, or when I ask them what it means like a group of people that you can always trust and count on. Well, that's probably how you operate. If that's your core value, that's probably how you operate with your friends and with your team. And it would be helpful to know that, because that's your kind of operating principle. So the one word ones, they just never solve the problem of, can I make a decision on it? Do I know if I'm doing a good job on it? And is it unique? And I have this thing called the validator. But so I'll try this with you, because
Let's do it.
the electric
Sounds
fence, we have all these questions, the 6 questions. And if people want to start with the 6 questions from the book, they can go to robertglazer.com/6, and it just has the 6 questions. So you don't write them all down. But the inverses are pretty telling, because it's the electric fence, and we all know what that feels like. So if I said to you, tell me about, and I'm asking in general, but most people have a specific memory in mind. Tell me about like the type of person or behavior or something that just drives you crazy that you can't stand.
Well, I actually figured this the other day. I was having a conversation about this. It's people who've already decided, I suppose, like people who just, there's absolutely no
Right.
curiosity, no, like I'm having conversations with people, and I've noticed that like I see a conversation as a place to like explore what's true, kind of thing. And so if they're not doing that, I'm not getting what I want out of the conversation. But it also can feel a bit like invalidating, because when people aren't curious, they're kind of just like looking at me like what are you doing? Like this is the way it is. This is what I think. That just drives me up the wall, and especially like it actually just makes me so angry.
Well, you prove my
yeah.
point, which is when you start doing this with people, their face, they don't say, like, kind of bothers me. You said crazy, angry, up a wall, your face tightened. Like it's an electric fence thing for you when people aren't curious, right? Or they've made up their mind, right? And so the clue for me would be the value is probably the opposite of that, right? Which is keep your mind open, or always be curious, or there's something in that realm. And if we go even deeper, I would say to you, all right, now where did that come from? Because when you can connect it, typically like you go to childhood and people are like, look, I was told like to follow the rule. Like they are basically doubling down on something, or they're doing the opposite. So either they had someone that fostered their cooperative open mind, or they were in an environment where they were told to like not ask any questions, and that became their defining purpose.
Yeah, so it's probably the latter for me. I mean, or maybe it was actually the mix of both, and I think that really highlighted the contrast for me. So my parents, I wouldn't say one home was much more this way and one was the other, but I grew up in split households, and I was exposed to different kinds of conversations and different kinds of people, and I think in certain contexts people would notice that I was very curious, and they'd just be like, so cool, and they would, those cute kind of cute moments that you can have with supportive adults. But in general, I've started following just like like on social media. In the few minutes I'm scrolling that each day, a page that's for neurodiverse people, which I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's me now. Oh, geez. But and it's kind of relatable experiences for people who grew up neurodiverse. And a really common theme there that I'm finding really relatable is you ask questions from a place of just curiosity and general harmless childlike curiosity, and people take it as a threat or a challenge to their authority, as this sort of thing, and so that was a real strong experience for me growing up, and it really stuck.
So you just proved my whole framework, which is great.
Yeah, you did.
I still have, which is the negative is super. And look, there's probably 3 or 4 other negative, but the negative, that's probably your dominant core value because that came first. The negative is super telling as to the positive, and the positive almost, to the value, and the value almost always connects to these experiences in a positive and negative way. And look, thing we have to remember is our purpose and pain lie close together. So for a lot of people, something that was uncomfortable ended up being their defining purpose. And so I'm not in the therapist chair of let's go discuss this and litigate the past, but it's like, look, you might, your biggest strength in life is being creative, and that might be from this pain of people dismissing your questions, right? As someone who maybe figured out that they were, neurodiverse, and this is just a consistent, repeatable pattern that I've seen, and people can then start to, and then my guess is if you started being like, oh yeah, I can map jobs up and situations and actually where I was when I, journalism, and you're in a business of asking questions, like it all just starts to make sense.
It does. I am looking, this is great because that was only 2 questions, and I am looking at things in a slightly different light. I mean, I know I love curiosity, but I think coming at it with the specific format of those questions, like,
well, you sent me the questions in advance, right? You wanted to make sure I knew what the questions were, so that, like, versus probably sometimes, again, that's your way of softening up. I'm going to ask question, like all of these things connect. Someone recently, I had him describe the experience, and it'll be an article, and I call it the supervillain. When we actually unpacked it, he was like, this conversation at this part, it was actually 3 core values that were the antithesis in this one conversation. So I call it like the supervillain, because if I know all your core values, I could invent the supervillain. Like if I'm feeling awake enough, I could be like, all right, so you're at a party and you talk to this guy or this girl, and it would have all inverse 4 qualities. But he actually, without knowing it, identified a supervillain. And
like a real person, you mean?
It was a real, not that the person was the villain, but what they did in this case.
Perception.
And so his thing was, you have to be credible. One of them was like, you need to be credible. And when he's a very sophisticated British gentleman, academic. And when we got into it, and he didn't want to tell me what it was, I could tell that there was someone in his family that presented information with a lot of confidence that I think he eventually realized wasn't true. And they bullied people in conversations. And so it's very important to him that people be credible and that they listen. And I think that is a complete inverse modeling of something that he experienced as a child.
Amazing. So how do you define the opposite, but of course I think that potentially leaves some wiggle room there for what's on the other side of that. So do you have other questions that kind of try to get into the positive?
Yeah,
positive side of this?
There's the 6 questions. As I mentioned, like we can get into a couple of them. There's what professional roles or jobs did you do your best work? So basically, if you read the book or you do the work of the course, it starts with these 6 questions. The 6 questions are meant to get all these themes out on 6 pieces of paper, and for you to look, they're designed to evoke the same things in different ways, and some of them are the inverses and some of them are not. And when you look across these 6 pieces of paper, you should start to see themes. And you'll start grouping the themes together, and then you'll run them through this validator, which is the thing that determines whether you have the right theme and you're wording in a way that is unique enough and can help you make decisions. So, some of those would be, when have you done your best work? Not, I worked at Starbucks, but what was it about it? Well, I had freedom. I was talking to customers. I had flexibility. Like, what were the things? There's one, like, what would you want people to show up to your funeral and say about you as your eulogy? That tends to get very directly to like how you want to be remembered, which is first time I ever did that exercise. I said, I want people to say that I made their life better in some way, which ultimately ended up being my dominant core value. So it kind of locks in. The other question I like is like, what do people come to you for help for, advice for? Like, what are you the go-to person for? So each of these questions, and if you put all the answers down, and I say to people, if you don't want to do the whole process, go to mindform.com/6, answer these questions with a cup of coffee for a half an hour and see if anything like pops out to you. Like you might be like, respect came up in every one of these things. And I did not expect to see that there. So there's something going on with respect with me.
Do you find people are sometimes quite surprised with what comes up?
I think I don't know what the right word is. I don't think I think it's validating in some ways, but I think they are somewhat surprised, not at the direction, but maybe at
Mm-hmm.
the intensity or focus on something that they hadn't totally identified.
Right, as in they're discovering, oh, this pattern is literally everywhere. How did I not notice it? That kind of thing.
Right. So in my most ironic one of all time, I had someone who realized that self-awareness was a core value of theirs, and they had not realized that. And when we got into it, they had a parent with some mental health issues, and the parent never could say the right thing when they were a kid and would just show up, and it was deeply embarrassing to them. So they for them, they were like, self-awareness is paramount. And what was happening was, as a leader, when someone on their team showed a lack of self-awareness, they were all over them and they didn't know why. And so they like connected all of this, and then they went to their team and they're like, look, self-awareness is really important to me. And if I ever jump on you on this, like, I'm sorry, but like, it actually is one of these things that like I care about most. And so I want to make sure you understand that. And here are the types of things that, you know, that sort of break self-awareness, in my team. So we all at 20, 30, 40, we are showing up with these things fully baked in us. I don't think they're going to change. And again, a lot of purpose comes from pain, but there's a real difference in whether you know it or not in terms of how you operate. Is it a strength or is it an Achilles heel for you?
And well, I guess you can speak from experience and talking with people through this process. But do you find there is always a way to turn what comes out of this process into a strength? There's always a positive to it. No one has a core value of hurt other people or something.
Right. We're not going to fix it, and nor should we. So here's a common one, and here's the best example I would give. I've had some people who seem to have a core strong value of trust, which ties closely to this why of trust. And we do a lot of the why work. And one of the questions I learned in the why work was, if you want to know if someone's value is trust or their why, you ask them this question. If someone violates your trust, does it matter what they did, or are they dead to you? And you'll go around a room of 10 people, and the first one, well, matters what they did, or if it was really bad or whatever. And then the seventh person will be like, they're dead to me. Like, just deadpan. They're like, there's no coming back. And so to those people, I would be like, look, I'm not going to ask you what it was, but was there a core violation of trust early in your life? And normally there's a tear that rolls down their face, or they get ashen, or they get really quiet. I'm like, okay, so understand it was there. So I've done this a few times. So here's probably what I know about you. You have a small group of friends, and it's really hard to get into it, and you've had them for a long time, and that's great. There's like a trusting. But I also know that if your spouse cheats on you, there's no coming back from that. For some people there is, but for you, that's it. Because you have this threat detection system, and you sort people into, are they trustworthy or not? And the problem, and it just, and so when they're 5 minutes late for a meeting, I wouldn't care about this, but to a trust person, they're like, can't be trusted. That's early warning radar. Can't be trusted. So if you don't know this, you are default in the workplace as a leader, sorting people into trust or not trust, throwing the key out, putting them in jail, and they don't even know. And we had an HR person being like, yeah, I would like, this person would have promoting people one quarter and putting them on a PIP the next quarter, and I couldn't figure out why. But it's a really big difference if you were to go to the team and be like, hey guys, like, I'm your new leader, Bob, and like, just so you know, trust is really important to me. And the things that break trust are things like, if I can't find you and you don't communicate where you are, and if you're late for meetings, and if you miss assignments. And by the way, trust when it's broken with me is really hard to get back. And so if you're feeling some distance, you should come have a conversation, and we should, talk about working through that. So I'm not going to change that person. Like, in fact, trust can be a really great thing. Like, it's just a matter of like how it's used and if you're aware of it. Right. So I don't think there's anything we're trying to fix with anyone. If you have some destructive behavior where you like to blow everything up, or like, yeah, you may want to do some work on that. But most of these things are just true for you now as an adult. And it could be what your strength is, but I think weaknesses are strengths overused in my definition.
Yeah, it's a good way to frame it. Uh, it's just another angle of this. Have you found yourself develop a bit of a knack for picking up, oh, that might be like the core values behind somebody's decisions that you find confusing or disruptive or upsetting or inconvenient? Have you sort of figured out, oh, okay, these are the core values that motivate these kind of behaviors, and has that empowered you to change the way you relate to people? That can be personal life, professional life.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage people, and we've had a lot of teams do this work together and do the course because they all want to do it for themselves and then share it with their team. If I'm someone who has include all perspectives core value, like that's really helpful to know what kind of work that I'll be good at. And there's certain projects that I won't like, right? Go make a unilateral decision on this. So look, I have done this work with a lot of people. I've had a lot of really deep conversations with people because I enjoy this and the why work. And I've seen them in arguments with other people on team. And I know it's not about the budget. I know that there's some deep childhood stuff going on there. For an example,
So funny.
like they are fighting over this budget, and I know that this person is include all perspectives and like wants to be heard and thinks it's really important to be heard. And I know this other person comes from a thing where they do not waste, right? And so she just feels like he's not listening and he feels like she's wasteful. And it actually, like, it's so much deeper than what they're arguing about. So all of these things in spiritual capacity, whether it's core values or why or strength finders, or all of these things to understand about ourselves, understand about the people we work with, and then you can very logically find where you're going to have points of friction where you can maybe have some better tools to work around that. And he was like, look, I'm going to hear you out on this, but you also have to understand that, like, we are you doing zero-based budgeting because we're not just going to do something because we did it last year. So I need justification that if you want to do 20% more things, then we need to find the 20% from last year that didn't work and that we're going to cut out. So, they can kind of use language that gets at that a little more.
Yeah, certainly one of the potencies of values is that they're always involved, right? So when you're aware of that really elucidates the picture in pretty much any kind of conflict or issue that comes up. It reminds me of nonviolent communication, right? You're probably
Correct.
familiar, but like Marshall Rosenberg's, that's usually a part of the framework. It's okay, you're doing this, I'm feeling this way. That's because this is something I value, or this is something I have a need for. And when you can get to that layer, suddenly the conversation is two people who know what's important to them trying to figure out a way to mutually get there, rather than two people who have put each other in a box of you're a problem or whatever,
Right.
just fighting and getting nowhere.
So I have a better way orientation, and my wife has a right way orientation and value. And we know this. And there's places where that works together, and then there's places where that is super dangerous. And so we use the wording. Like, she will say to me, like, I made all our plans for the weekend, and please do not make it better. Don't touch it. Just go along with it. Like, I've done all the work on it. And sometimes, like, when she's using way too much, I'm like, look, there's no wrong answer here. Like, we just need to make a decision. Like, because I know she, has a kind of heavy decision-making apparatus. So we use that orientation. And like, that's for me, I'm very aware of, we are generally super aligned in our values. It's not that those values are unaligned. It's just that they can have a little bit of a collision course. And if I'm aware of it, I can manage around it better. It's not like, an opposite would be like, and look, you can understand why this happened. So imagine you're married and my dad died when I was young. I'm just saying this. And so I have a live for the moment, sort of orientation, and someone else, had a different done their experience where there was never any planning, and they have a like save and focus on tomorrow because they had a live for the moment parent, and they were constantly, having problems with, oh, we don't have any savings or otherwise. So this becomes a real thing when two adults, when one has a save for tomorrow and plan for tomorrow, and one has a live today like there's no tomorrow. Like, that's complicated if you're in a relationship.
Yeah, in the case of you and your partner, it's two lines that look parallel when you're really zoomed in, but when you zoom out, you can kind of see they're coming to a point.
Yeah, and I would argue that, like,
there.
if that's your one point of intersection, you can work around that. If you have like
Mm.
4 points of oppositeness like that, like the opposite magnet, that's hard. Right? Imagine we add some more, like one person's self-reliant and the other's dependent. One person it believes in conversation and the other believes in unilateral decision. Like these are where you start to be like, I'm not sure that's going to work. Like that's just too much reverse polarization on a daily basis to work through.
I suppose in the position that you're in, where you're having conversations with all sorts of different people about these values, and you're getting in touch with, you're kind of hearing some of the stories of why people come to see things that way. Are you in a position where you can see, okay, there's truth and value to both of those, even though they're exact opposites? I see that both are good, and how can you bring that awareness into finding reconciliation?
It's in some cases you can't. And again, it's not a right or a wrong. I think you said before, there's like truth and liar. Those are right or wrong. Right. But I had someone who was doing this work in a business context. We figured out her core values. She was going through a divorce. And she said to me, I just realized that my ex is like the opposite of these two core values. And I was like, not surprised. I think it's too hard. If you're the opposite on 4 or 5 of your values, the opposite, not like maybe they run next to each other or they're not the same. That means that like, I think people confuse in a relationship. Like you can have different hobbies, activities, personalities, but you got to be aligned on the big stuff. And the big stuff is where you choose to live and how you're going to raise your kids and on your values. And if you come to these things with 180 different viewpoint on 4 or 5 things, I just think that's like really hard. And sadly, like I think it's a low probability of success because you're going to feel like you have to compromise on what matters most to you every day. And that's the whole point of this big 3 is making sure that you have alignment. As I say, like my wife and I are always in alignment on the big things. Day to day, we're very different and different activities and otherwise. And I want, you can have all the same activities, but you could be fundamentally on different pages about the big thing.
You're great at answering my questions with specific stories, which is awesome. And maybe you could bring a few to the answer to this question. Like how have you seen people, like what shifts have you seen people make? What new decisions or ways of making decisions, or maybe new paths that people have walked on when you've gone through the process with people to finding their values? What's been the kind of new life for them on the other side of that?
Yeah, I don't want to be in the business of being responsible for a lot of breakups. So I have a lot of people email me that they changed their job or that they had stressed about their job forever. And man, when they decided to quit, when they realized it wasn't values aligned, the relief that they felt. I have numerous of these emails. The weight lifted. And somehow, like, I'm kind of a little bit of a universe guy. I find when you quit something really bad, negative, like somehow something comes along to fill that void. I have found, like, I've
What's that called?
constantly seen this.
That's called is it regression to the mean? You know, if you're so far below where you want to be, you roll the dice, you're probably going to be closer.
Over the years, I've had horrible clients, and I'm like, and I just didn't want to give up the revenue. And as soon as I give it up, something else better kind of fills that. I think people have thought about their communities, both where they want to live and the type of people they want to interact with. Once they're clear on what matters to them, they realize that being in environments, like if you're focused on health and vitality, which is another one of my values, like I always poor Newcastle, but I pick on it. Like you probably don't want to live in Newcastle, England, where everyone goes to the bar at 2:00 in the afternoon, right? You're either going to not go to the bar and miss out what everyone else is doing socially, or are you going to go to the bar and feel really bad that you're drinking 6 days a week because it's not what you want to be doing, because your health is the most important thing to you, because you have a health issue, right? You want to go live in Park City where you walk out the door and people are like, do you want to come hiking or do you want to come to our thing? Like the social environment is designed around different activities. So once people have that clarity, like the decision making gets easier in all of these areas.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. What role does place have in the decisions people are, decisions around place? What role does that have as people discover their values? Have you had people move, or maybe just realize, oh, like I'm in the wrong subculture or part of town, and I need, because of course values kind of can soften
Yeah.
out and extend into the collective unconscious a little bit,
I have to
and they
look
can
through
be
the
very
stories
potent by place. Yeah, sorry.
people sent me. I assume I'll get more when we get through the launch and people read the book, but I definitely think people have rethought. Like I was I was doing a workshop with a management team that was doing all their core values, and I saw it in this woman's eyes, the community thing. She was basically like, I live in the wrong community. Now, I don't know what she did about it, but it was just so clear to her that as we talked through this, she realized that the community didn't reinforce, like an example in the book, kind of like, let's say you are an include all perspectives person, or you're curious. And I like to talk to different people and get different ideas. And you live in this community where everyone's got a sign. You're either on team red or team blue, and there's no in between, and everyone's fighting. You're like, this isn't like this is not the environment that I want to be in. I want to be in a place where everyone isn't declaring that they're on a side about everything, right? And it feels too divisive for me. And I'm an inclusive person, so I'm sure I will hear more stories about this, because a lot of what I've done is sort of in the workplace. The stories I've heard in more workplace, but this big three kind of rollout, I'm guessing over the next year or two, I'll get a lot more stories about people. Look, and community can be where you live, but it can also be the groups you join or the organizations you join, and think about just where are you spending your time, and does it reinforce the things that are most important to you, or does it make it a little bit harder?
Mm, mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, how do you kind of, I mean, with your not having keywords thing, I think that's a great step in
Not
this
having single
direction.
keywords, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
single keywords. But how do you reconcile that our values are, they're incredibly personal, they're soft? I think, I've been on the journey on and off over many years, trying to figure out, what is it what kind of person am I? What is it that I value? Who do I want to be? I've done different kind of structured things, or just ask the questions. And something I've noticed that makes the process difficult is that the answer to those questions can be very, very difficult to articulate in just a few words. And it's something that, is kind of, it's almost bodily, and it's soft, and it's very, it's very, very personal, and also perhaps a bit changeable, some parts of it. So, how do you bring this process to people in a way? How do you work with values in a way that honors that they might, someone's values might be beyond what you can just kind of list out, and then you can follow the list. People need to be in touch with what's behind the list, what's under it as well.
Exactly. No, this work, as I said, the nomenclature is just the recall or the remembrance. It's a value when you can really connect to where it comes from, and it's foundationally like exactly like the story you told. Like when I present, I give a speech, I show my report cards and how horrible they were, and the capacity, because people always told me I think he can be better. So it actually is a very personal thing that comes from me, and always feeling like I was better, that people told me that I was. I just wasn't learning the things that I was interested in. It does that it think of the verbiage as just sort of the recall and how you remember it, but the process really encourages you to kind of think and look for that connection, and then you realize like this is real and this is deep. It's not just a word. Like it's a feeling, and it's a way of operating.
Right. So kind of, I mean, of course, to capture something, you need a word or phrase, but you're looking for a word or phrase that activates something else, that brings things up for you.
Activate's
Yeah,
a great
that makes
word.
sense.
Think about same thing with good company core values. Like there's the word, but there should be an understanding of what that means behind it and how you're supposed to behave.
Yeah, it's a sign. It's a sign to something. I mean, I guess it comes back to that original metaphor of the tunnel or the electric fence. Your value is actually that place, but you're putting up
Yeah,
lights, you're putting up signs to point you in that direction.
exactly.
Map versus landscape, I suppose. Well, we're sort of coming to the end of our time, but from all of this around values, I was hoping to get into, because I was very intrigued and it seemed relevant to me, some of the ideas in Elevate around
Yeah.
increasing your capacity, but unfortunately we just don't have time. Maybe we can talk
We'll
again.
come back. We'll dive into that.
Yeah, I look forward to that. But from our conversation, what is just one thing you would really want people to take away, whether it's a key insight or an action?
Yeah, I think the insight would be like all of this stuff is great and thinking about all these alignment things, but you can't do that until you know what aligning to. So you can buy the book, check out the course, just go look at those questions, but like spend 15 minutes, answer a few of those questions and see if something comes up for you that you didn't expect. And I promise you it's the best couple hours that you could spend is really thinking about this concept and being able to articulate your personal values.
Yeah, I believe you. I think I'll do it. I enjoyed the first two questions. I was hoping you'd take me through all of them, but that's all right.
Well, we got a whole second episode lined up, so it's great.
Sounds like it. What was I going to say? Oh yes, just you've talked a bit about everything that's coming out. So could you just like actually say that
Sure.
explicitly? What are the things that are coming up, and how can people find this on your website, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. So compass-within.com is the book page. We're launching. It won't be hardcover everywhere, but it'll be audio and paperback on October 14th. And if you sign up to pre-order the book beforehand, we're giving the $100 course for free at compasswithin.com. All my information, newsletter, my Friday 4 newsletter that goes out every week to 100,000 leaders across the world is at Robert Glazer, GLAZER.com.
Easy. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Robert. It's been awesome to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform Podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io/podcast. I hope to see you inside.